Minister, officials from the Provincial and National Treasury, and welcome to the Standing Committee on Budget. Members, we have a full house present this morning. Thank you very much for that. Just in terms of apologies, we have not received any apologies for today's meeting. And I would just like to confirm with Mr. Davids if that is correct and if we have a quorum to start this meeting. Mr. Davids.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Good morning to you, to the members and the departmental officials and the Minister. Honorable Chairperson, there has been no apologies received, Chairperson. However, one of the members did call me that they having connectivity issue, Member Petrus. And he will log on, Chairperson. And Chair, we do have quorum for this meeting, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, if we can just do a quick round of introductions. My name is Peter Johnson. I am the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Budget. Over to you, members.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Noko Masipa. I am a member of this committee. Thank you.
Good morning, members.
Chair. I am an alternate member of this committee and the chair of the Standing Committee on Education.
Good morning, everyone. I am also an alternative member on this. I'm an alternate member on this committee, and I am a chair of Premier and Constitutional Matters. I'm Benedicta van Minnen, sorry.
Good morning, colleagues. Dave Bryant,
Morning,
member of the
Chairperson.
committee and chair of Local Government and Environment.
Morning, Chairperson. My name is Nomin Kondlo. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Morning, Chairperson.
Colleagues, I'm Basil Petrus, member of this committee.
Morning, Chairperson. My name is Beauty Stoffels and I'm a member of the committee.
Morning, Chairperson. My name is Pat Lecker.
Morning, everyone. I'm Member Boyson. I'm an alternate member and the chairperson for Health and Wellness.
My apologies, I was muted. Thank you, members. We've got a full house this morning. Thank you very much for joining. I will now hand over to the Minister Deirdre Baartman, and the HOD for introductions. I would suggest that we ask the HOD just for the officials from PT that will be presenting today to introduce themselves. Otherwise, the introductions might take us another half an hour. Over to you, Minister and HOD.
Good morning, Deirdre Baartman. Thank you so much, Chair. I'm going to hand over to HOD for the introductions for the team.
Good morning, Chair. Julinda Gantana, head of the department. The team that will be covering the first item on the agenda, I'm going to ask, starting with Annalise Pick, and then we'll go through the team that will be doing the presentations from both Provincial Treasury and the Department of the Premier. Thank you. Annalise.
Good morning to the committee. I'm Annalise Pick, Public Finance. And my colleague from the Provincial Treasury, Michelle Nicholas, will also be presenting.
Department of the Premier.
Good morning, Senator Ishmael. And my colleague, Joe Barnett, will also be presenting, and Faisal Nordin is also here. Thank you. And Ilse Pretorius. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Thank you, HOD. I just want to confirm whether we have any colleagues from the National Treasury joining us this morning. If you can please just introduce yourself. Any colleagues from National Treasury? Mr. Davids, I'm not sure if you saw any colleagues from National Treasury online this morning.
Honorable Chairperson, yes, I'm seeing Dr. Pakis, and I saw Mr. Gobain this morning, Chair. in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Welcome, Dr. Pakis. I see you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and the honorable members. I'm joined by two of my colleagues who will introduce themselves. I'm Letsepa Pakis. I'm responsible for the local and the provincial fiscal framework within IGR of the National Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pakis. I just want to check with your two other colleagues if they can just introduce themselves.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and honorable members and colleagues. My name is Mandlenkosi Khobiani within the National Treasury Intergovernmental Relations under Provincial Budget Analysis, and I am responsible for Western Cape. Thanks.
Good morning, Chair. Ellen Long Matladi, National Treasury. I work with Dr. Pakis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to you as well. Members, we will now deal with the first item on our agenda, which is the briefing by the Provincial Treasury on the 2024-25 fourth quarter performance of the Western Cape Government. Minister and HOD, I have forgotten to afford you the opportunity for some introductory remarks, should you wish to do so. But I will now hand over to you and the HOD for the presentation, and if you would like to make some introductory remarks. Over to you, Minister and HOD.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I think because we have quite a packed agenda and 99% of the agenda is highly technical, I'm going to hand straight over to the team, and if there's any questions, I'm ready to assist. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister.
Chair, if I may, through you, while the presentation is being flighted.
Yes, please go ahead and speak. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So we're here for the fourth quarter presentation for the 24-25 financial year, which also culminates in the entire financial year for 24-25. So what we have sent the committee is in terms of a detailed, what we call in terms of a detailed submission on each of the votes for the fourth quarter. And the presentation will then look at the culmination and therefore the outcome for the 24-25 financial year. We're going to kick off then on from the performance information with the Department of the Premier. Thank you.
Great. Job Barnett will start.
Good morning, Chair and honourable members. As you know, we are reporting on quarter four. It is slightly later than normal because of the budget adjustment. So we also included pre-audit data in our presentation. So on the overview of provincial performance, there's a gradual increase in performance across all quarters with the annual pre-audit performance at 90%, where 804 of the 894 targets were achieved for 2004-25. In the first column, note the increase in the indicators reported on for quarter four, which is 683. And the reason for that is because the annual targets are, in most cases, reported in the last quarter of a financial year. On the overview of institutional performance, the last two columns, departments achieved 92% of their targets during the financial year, and public entities achieved 77%. None of our 13 departments achieved 100% of the targets, and half of the public entities achieved 100%. Departments also partially achieved 7% of their targets, and their annual targets for public entities were on 16%. The governance cluster had the best performance across institutions during 24-25, followed by the economic cluster. And also note that the quarterly release for Q4 shared with members will provide further details on institutional performance. Next slide. Okay, so this slide shares the quarterly performance trends across departments with their annual pre-audit performance for 24-25, including pre-audit provincial performance average that is indicated in the last column and also in the yellow bar. For Q4, the performance of the Department of Social Development, Infrastructure and Mobility Department was below the provincial average of 86%. And on pre-audit performance, Education Department, Health and Wellness, Social Development, Infrastructure as well as Mobility Department performed below the provincial average of 92%. The key reasons for underperformance as reported by institutions were mainly based on demand-driven indicators, where there might not have been a demand on meeting the target as was set, some procurement challenges, delays in internal processes, as well as dependencies on stakeholders and resource constraints. Next slide. Okay, for public entities, the same format as we did with departments. For public entities, the Liquor Authority, CACIDRA, as well as Freeport Saldanha performed below the provincial average for Q4. That was 79%. And performance below the pre-audit performance average of 77% for those institutions. And also the key reasons for underperformance here was reported as demand-driven indicators, delay in internal processes, as well as dependencies on stakeholders. Thank you. I'm handing over to Faisal.
No, thank you. Faisal has the flu, so I was instructed to present. Okay, so I want to share the socioeconomic picture through outcome indicators and key performance indicators. Suffice to say that we always share the socioeconomic environment, and for the quarter that we actually talk to, which is the fourth quarter, the GDP for Western Cape increased by 0.8% during the fourth quarter, and our official unemployment rate remained at 9.6%. However, I need to note where we are now. There's been a further positive growth of 0.5% quarter on quarter for the Q1 of 2025. I also need to note that while we are speaking about the fourth quarter performance, where we are now, the employment data for Q2 has been released. And for Q1, the unemployment remained at 19.6%. However, a slight increase or 2% increase from 19.6% to about 21.1% in Q2. And that's the latest unemployment data that was just released 2 days ago. So what we also do, we look at government performance and our interventions in relation to that socioeconomic picture. And we can see that DSD have created about 873 work opportunities, DRI 2978 work opportunities, environmental affairs 96%, EI applications, agriculture also about 265 jobs created, DDAT 126 businesses were supported. And then we look at our public entities, Provincial also 73 business supported, and Westcott about 56 trade declarations signed. When one look at the next socioeconomic picture, the next slide, on safety, what I want to share in the safety space that violent crime, homicide data for this quarter show 4% decrease compared to the quarter 4 of 2023-24. So that's quite positive. Then the same period last year, an 11% decrease compared to quarter 3 of the 24-25. That means the previous quarter. I want to note that while there's 1123 homicide in quarter 4 compared to 1167 homicides in quarter 4 of the previous year. So that is quarter on quarter, but it is the quarter 4 in comparison to the quarter 4 of the previous financial year. So 1123 homicides in quarter 4 compared to 1268 homicides in quarter 3 of the 2024-25 financial year. That's 11% increase from the previous quarter. Then I need to note that 13 priority areas in Cape Metro recorded a 9% decrease compared to quarter 4 of 2023-24. This accounted for 46% of all homicides in the province. 12% decrease in sexual assaults presented in quarter 4 of 2024-25 compared to the same period last year. And finally, in the socio-economic picture, 2174 sexual assaults presented in quarter 4, and that is 43% of these were under 18-year-old. When one look at the government picture, then one can see police oversight. There was about 36 neighborhood watch structures. In health, approximately 96.3% patient safety incident cases were closed in regional hospitals. In specialized hospital, 99%, centralized hospital, 98.7%, and tertiary hospitals, 91.3%. When one look at DSD, 576 children were placed in foster care. 484 victims of crimes and violence were provided. And then the children, 214 children in conflict with law referred to diversion programs. In DRI, it's about the infrastructure and roads. 7,415 kilometers of gravel roads were bladed. And in our Gate P, 7 completed criminal investigations handed to the NPA. In one look at mobility, 973 speed operations and 1523 traffic law enforcement operations were conducted. In our entities, 86 enforcement operations were conducted with other agencies. So in the safety space, one can see there is a picture that shows safety within neighborhood structures, youth, children, in the health space, in hospitals, on the roads, infrastructure, and also in people on the roads in terms of people safety. Thank you. When one look at well-being, then in the socio-economic picture, the HIV rates for 15 to 25-year-olds for the fourth quarter was 1.3%, exactly meeting the target. And 15.65% of children born in government facilities in quarter 4 weighted under 2,500 grams. That was below the target of 16.5%. When one look at well-being and government interventions, one can see that education, 757 early childhood development facilities were fully registered as compliant. And then one look at our literacy and our numeracy, 52.8% assessed for grade 3 can read for meaning. And as you know, it is just not about reading any longer, it's about reading for meaning. And 55.9% of our grade learners attainable acceptable outcomes for mathematics. And it shows the importance here of continuously tracking our literacy and our numeracy. In health, 80% of our TB clients completed the treatment. It's no longer just about measuring TB client rate, but that percentage of TB clients that completed treatment, and 67.2% of children under 1 completed their primary course of immunization, and that also shows reportments of vaccinations in children. DSD, for just over 4,500 older person benefit from our subsidized beds, and just under 8.5 older person benefit from subsidies that were transferred to community-based care. And just under 6,000 victims of gender-based violence access psychological support. 109 persons with disabilities live in government-owned residential facilities, and just about 22,000 persons were provided with subsidized meals, and shows where the government funding goes when it comes to the aged and disability. Very important, especially as we are here in Ismail.
Ms. Ismail, apologies, sorry for interrupting you. If we can just see that these slides move with your presentation as well. I'm not sure who's doing the slides on your side. I see Ms. Cantana said that okay, thank you.
Okay. And then finally, agriculture supported 660 households with agriculture food production initiatives, and 355 veterinary public health samples were analyzed for food safety, and 158 inspections were carried out at meat producing outlets. I thank you.
Michelle?
I'm going to present the provincial expenditure as at 31 March. I see there's a hand up.
Member Lita Kong? I see your hand is up.
Yes, sorry. I'm just trying to check if I'm in a right meeting. I just joined in now.
This is the budget meeting, or what meeting are you looking for?
Oh, okay. No, it's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Lita Kong. Thank you. Back to you, Ms. Nicholas.
Thank you. So at the end of 24-25, the last that ended on the 31st of March, our total spending was 84.242 billion, or 98.2% of the budget. So our preliminary underspending was 1.5 billion. You'll see if you look at the right side column, the big underspending was under infrastructure and agriculture. Now, if you go to the next slide, you will see that the numbers for agriculture and infrastructure. And the reasons for the underspending was because of the CASP grant of 300 million. That was funding for the disaster that we had in the previous year. It was only received on the 26th of March, and so it could not be spent and the service delivered. Then also for infrastructure, they also received funding in the adjustments estimate of last year for disaster funding and related to roads infrastructure projects, as well as projects in Cape Nature and for flood damage repairs, and not all of that was spent in the previous year. If you go to the next slide, it shows you the rollover applications that were made. So in the last three columns, you'll see that rollover application was made for the national conditional grants, which was the CASP grant and the provincial road maintenance grant. And subsequently, we did actually receive that funding. The rest, 250 million, will be were provincial rollovers that were requested by departments, which will be finalized in the adjustments estimate process. If we move to the next one, it shows you the public entities. Here it shows that 92.7% of the budget was spent at the time. And then just the reasons for one of the bigger underspendings was the Western Cape Gambling and Racing Board. The saving was mostly COE underspending due to resignations and vacant posts, and capital underspending due to the board's office accommodation that is still in progress. Then under the Liquor Authority, there was delays experienced in the construction of the walk-in centre and the acquisition of computer equipment. And with Casidra, it was mainly due to staff vacancies and some goods and services. If we move to the next slide, this just gives you the expenditure on infrastructure as at the fourth quarter. And as you already know, the disaster funding projects and related rollover, the process was finalized, but you can see there under transport in grey and human settlements that the full funding was not spent because of the grant, the settlement grant that was stopped, as well as savings, as well as disaster funding that was spent lower. The disaster fund allocation in 24-25 adjustments budget was 947. It went to 5 votes, which were infrastructure, education, health, agriculture, and Cape Nature. Of that, everybody spent their funding, and there was a rollover just for Department of Infrastructure and Agriculture. The BFI expenditure in education, there was 364 million spent on the Rapid Schools Build program, and then quarter 4 expenditure was 11.08 billion, or 91% of the budget. If you go to the next slide, it gives a breakdown of just how the infrastructure spending is spent, and you can see most of it, 70% of it, is spent on existing infrastructure assets. So new or replacement assets is lower than spending on our current assets, which is what it's supposed to be, because we have to make sure that we look after the assets we have. And then the last slide, I think, is for revenue. And if you look at the second last column on your right-hand side, you'll see that the Western Cape had an over-recovery of 299 million on Western Cape own revenue. And then if you move down to the last third of the page, you'll also see the revenue that was received on casino taxes and horse racing and liquor licenses. So total vote on receipts, the collections was 45% over target. And then the gambling taxes was mainly due to the growing trend in online sports betting. And that is it from our side.
Chair, if you will allow me just to wrap up. So as you can see on the financials, we spent 98% of our budget. Now that is less than previous years. So in the last 3 years, we have a trend of spending 99% of our budget. But the main reason for that is the disaster funding that we received in the 2024 adjustments budget. But subsequently, as Michelle has also indicated, we have received a approval of rollover regarding the disaster funding, and so therefore we see seamless spending on the grant funding from the one financial year into the other year regarding the rollover. And so that is the only difference in terms of when we compare ourselves to our previous performing spend on the financial side. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD, to you and your entire team for the first presentation. Members, we have quite a lengthy agenda to deal with this morning, and we've got a few more presentations that we will receive this morning. So I will afford the National Treasury the second point on the agenda for to present to the committee. And after they have presented, we will deal with questions of clarity based on the first two presentations before we move to the fourth point on the agenda. Dr. Pakis, over to you and your team for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, for the opportunity. I'm going to start us off. I think, Honorable Chair, we must, I think we must acknowledge and appreciate and really begin by acknowledging the committee report emanating from the meeting we had with the committee on the 2nd of July, where we were then subsequently requested to provide information by the 31st of July. And I would like to sincerely thank the honorable members for their understanding and the graciousness they allowed us in terms of additional time to then be able to collate the required information. I think we owe it to the committee to indicate that the significant part of the delay has been due to the extensive multi-stakeholder and different spheres involved in terms of collaborating to ensure that we give the committee accurate information and to ensure that we assemble quite a comprehensive and accurate response to the matters that the committee had raised. So this process really required input from various departments, provincially and nationally as well. And we're grateful to the committee's patience around that. And we have worked to ensure that the information we have is both accurate and reliable, which is why I'm pleased to inform the committee that the report is much closer to being finalized now. We've received the outstanding report we expected from National Department of Health, and we have referred that to the National Treasury budget analysts and examiners that are responsible for the health sector to verify, and then from which we will then put it into the process of approval so that it can come to yourselves. So if the committee can please bear with us and give us until next Friday to be able to provide all that information that was required. And then, Chair, turning into today's agenda, we have about, I think, four items that the committee had wanted us to speak to. I think I'm just going to perhaps speak in general around the first of those points, which required us to speak to I think the conditions and terms attached to provincial and municipal allocations in the division of revenue associated with participation, economic inclusion, SMMEs, and so forth. I think, honorable members, this is not an easy one for us to tackle because with the policy intent, usually the application on the ground is lacking, and unfortunately, it is the sector departments that then manage these grants in as much as supporting the sector departments at the provincial level, but also the municipalities in terms of the procurement processes that would then bear fruit, to some of these imperatives from a policy perspective. Just to indicate that the division of revenue as the primary legislative instrument that governs the equitable division of the nationally raised revenue each year is quite clear in terms of what is expected, and each year the Division of Revenue Act is accompanied by the grant frameworks that then stipulates the conditions with which these should be that should be adhered to, that should be followed, and the grant conditions in the main promote the use of SMMEs and the community inclusion as well. In particular, I think on the community inclusion, there is in mind when I saw this request from the committee came the informal settlement upgrading partnership grant, which necessitate community involvement. It also sets aside a particular percentage, 3% of that grant, for the purposes of community inclusion in decision makings related to that grant. Others don't make specific percentage allocations towards this or the SMMEs, but in particular, they do make a special preference. I know with the human settlements grants, progressively, we've had percentages that are targeting vulnerable groups, including SMMEs, those led by the youth and women, and so forth. And of course, all organs of state, including provinces and municipalities, are required to comply with the Preferential Treatment Procurement Policy Framework Act, and all the developments are there. So, which is also where then these grants will then find themselves into implementation policies of the certain sectors and municipalities as well. And of course, I've mentioned that some of the grant frameworks are quite explicit in terms of the targets for SMMEs. Many grants, such as the Municipal Infrastructure Grant, the Urban Development Settlement Grant, as well as the Provincial Roads Maintenance Grant, include some explicit requirements on the participation of SMMEs, local contractors. And these frameworks often really require provinces and municipalities to report on the value and the number of contractors awarded to the SMMEs and demonstrate an effort that is being built to build the required capacity there. Community participation is also quite big on the agenda, as it really assists in terms of ensuring that there is labor intensiveness as well. I think in the MEEC, municipal infrastructure grant, as well as the energy grants, we've got specific conditions that look at labor intensive methods in terms of the delivery there. And these are really geared towards ensuring that there is adequate participation from the communities. In fact, from the EPWP grants, we've gone further and to say, even the policies, that govern the use of the grants at a municipal level must indicate and must be clear in terms of labor-intensive methods, and then that is what is being incentivized in that process as well. And then, of course, honorable members, there is also another enabling legislation. I think I can think of the Municipal Systems Act and the Municipal Finance Management Act as well, which require municipalities to undertake public participation processes and the development of their IDPs and budgets. And these grants also lend themselves as part of the IDP process in terms of the project identification, but also in terms of the budget of the municipalities as well. So this also ensures that there is community participation that is embedded in these I think levers that are there. In terms of the monitoring, the reporting, and the accountability, that's where the honorable members.
Apologies,
from where we
Mr.
sit.
Mr. Pakis, I just want to
Yes,
confirm: is there supposed to be slides on this, or is there not supposed to be slides?
No slides on this one, Honorable Chair. I'm just speaking to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pakis. I just want to check, Member Nkondla, I'm assuming you wanted to ask the same thing.
I am, Chair, and I've got challenges if we're just going to get a presentation that is verbal, because what do we have as as a reference as a committee if we are having a verbal presentation so that we can make reference on the issues being raised by National Treasurer? So I was asking about that, and I'm sincerely concerned that we are accepting just getting a report that is verbal.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. I have already spoken to Mr. Davids offline about how we will deal with this after the meeting when we get to resolutions. Dr. Pakis, over to you again.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and I note the concern from honourable members around this. I think, as I've indicated, we can put this in a presentation, in a report to the committee. But I think the essence of what we're saying is these are meant, they are allowed in legislation, but in terms of practice, the Treasury does not do a monitoring of these. It is the sector departments that would be in a position to assist the committee in terms of how practically these have been done. So from the legislative perspective, in terms of the Municipal Systems Act, the MFMA, the PFMA, as well as the Division of Revenue, that is what is being promoted. I think that's the submission to the committee. But whether these are being done, the Treasury doesn't monitor that part. It is the sector departments that does that. But Chair, having said that, I mean, we're willing to get the committee's guidance in terms of how we should approach this. Quite certainly, within the time that was provided to us, we couldn't collate all the information from the sectors, which would also be difficult to try and verify within the stipulated period as well. So our main contribution, Chair, as the slides would indicate in front of you, is on item 4. So in terms of item 4.1, the request from the committee on the provincial equitable share reforms, Elelwang will provide us with a comprehensive presentation on the provincial equitable share, including the reforms that have been made to ensure that the equitable share and this disbursement of revenues to all provinces, is fair. And then we will also then have me come back to then present on a single slide on the program of action in terms of the working group, highlighting also the emerging focus areas for further work that is emerging from the current discussions at budget council level, but from the committees as well of National Parliament, from the legislatures as well, in particular in relation to the provincial equitable share. And then covering item 4.2 also from this presentation will be then the rollovers on unspent funds. So Mandla will then conclude with a detailed presentation covering the last six slides, which then address the issues of rollover, specifically the unspent funds allocated through the adjustments appropriation bill as requested by the committee, the process for rolling these over across 2-year periods, and the application following from there. So honorable members, we are aware that there might be differing understanding in regards to the concept of top slicing, and we would propose, honorable members, that we address this matter during the Q&A session, where hopefully we would have clarity in terms of the context and be able to then respond to the specific concerns by the members in regards to that part. From our perspective, and as a matter of a policy, the National Treasury does not support the practice of top slicing, and which we understand to mean a national department proposing to retain a portion of a conditional grant for its own capacity to manage the grant. This we don't support because there was a time where we had done quite a number of assessments in terms of what would be adequate to manage these grants, and such allocations were made. But we continue to hear and see submissions from relevant sectors managing these grants, asking to top slice the grants so that they can beef up their monitoring capacity, which is something that, of course, we have trouble accepting. So if the members have a different understanding of that, we'll be happy to clarify that as well. With that said, Chair, I think it's just, I would like to perhaps indicate that the formula remains a robust and is able to absorb any
Apologies,
additional funds.
Dr. Pakis, before you continue, I just want to check with the HOD, Ms. Cantana, just in terms of item 4 on the agenda. I just want to confirm, is there anything from Provincial Treasury that you will be presenting on this item, or I just want to confirm that before we continue?
Chair, morning through you. No, we don't have a presentation on any of these items.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, HOD. Members, I will then allow Dr. Pakis for National Treasury to continue with item 4 before we move to questions and answers, as we were actually expecting a presentation on agenda point 3, but we will deal with this at the end of the meeting, but we will then first deal with all the presentations. So please just make notes of your questions, and then we will do the discussion at the end of National Treasury's presentation. Back to you, Dr. Pakis.
No, thanks, Chair. And I think I was just touching on the second part that was related to the top slicing in terms of the ability of the provincial equitable share formula to absorb the additional funds. So I was indicating that there certainly is a bigger appetite within the formula to absorb additional funds that are allocated, whether it's through the normal budget process, the special allocations, or any emergency allocations. And I think one nuance as endorsed by the Budget Council, and I think where the Minister of Finance in the province sits, and the Technical Committee on Finance, where the HOD sits, is the treatment of additional in-year allocations, specifically for the cost of employees, where if the additions are made in year, then the headcount is used as the basis to allocate it. But if it's over the MTF, the normal budget, then it does speak to a normal updates to the formula. So it remains agile in that part of response. So we're looking forward to this engagement, honorable members. Let me not waste more time, and thank you. And I would now like to hand over to Elelwang to take us through the first 6 slides of our presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to the MEC as well as the colleagues on the call. As introduced by Dr. Pakis, my name is Elelwang Matladi, and I'm just going to take you through most of the slides in the presentation, and then Dr. Pakis as well as Mr. Kobian will come in later on to sort of expand. So in the presentation, I will be taking you through the technical updates that we undertake on the PES formula on an annual basis, some of the provincial equitable share formula reforms that have been introduced, as well as some of the future work that we are looking to do in collaboration, of course, with the PESC task team. And then later on, Mr. Hobian will come in on the rollover process. So in terms of Section 227 of the Constitution, it entitles provinces to an equitable share of the nationally raised revenue in order to enable it to provide and perform functions that are allocated to it. With that, there are also constitutional considerations that have to be considered in terms of that nationally raised revenue that is then allocated to provinces. And some of these considerations need to look at the province's ability to provide basic services and perform the functions that are allocated to them, their fiscal capacity, as well as the efficiency, some of the developmental needs that sometimes come up, economic disparities. And then when it comes to economic disparities, this also speaks to the redistributive nature of the equitable share, as well as some of the infrastructure grant formulas that also have a mechanism to redistribute funds towards poor provinces as well as municipalities. And then it also has to look into the obligations of the provinces in terms of national legislation. So this would be speaking to the obligations that are assigned by the Constitution. Those would be the exclusive as well as the concurrent functions that speak to the powers and functions of each sphere of government. So the PES is the main source of revenue through which provinces are able to perform their functions. And in there, we use 6 components that we update annually to run the formula. And this essentially serves as a guide to allocate resources to provinces. So each component of the PES formula, being the provincial equitable share formula, is updated annually with objective and as much as possible with the most recent data to reflect changes in relative demand, as well as in terms of ensuring fairness in the allocations. So with the data that we use to update the PES formula on an annual basis, we usually rely on data that is published by Statistics South Africa, as well as administrative data from the Department of Health, as well as the National Department of Basic Education. So although the provincial equitable share is determined through a formula, the Constitution still gives provincial governments the power to determine priorities as well as allocate budgets. So on this slide, honorable members, we're just looking at the technical data updates that we make to the PES formula. So if we just focus on the figures, they highlight some of the data sources that we use to update each of the 6 components of the PES. So with education and health being the largest one, we usually use data both from Statistics South Africa, being the mid-year population estimates, which are published annually. And then we also use learner enrollment numbers from the Department of Basic Education. And then on the health, constituting 27% of the entire formula, we use a variety of data sources, one of those being the mid-year population estimates. And later on in the presentation, honorable members, I will actually take you through the revised risk-adjusted index that was introduced in the 2022 MTIF. And then we have the basic share, the poverty component, the economic component. So components such as the economic component would then benefit the smaller provinces, those that would be considered as poor. So this is where the redistributive nature of the component also kicks in, whereas the institutional component is actually divided equally. And this would benefit the provinces that actually have smaller populations, because no data is used here. However, each province gets enough, the same amount of from this one. So in terms of the poverty, I think I just want to go there because this has been a topic of discussion in the meetings that we've had recently, as well as earlier in the year, in terms of the updates that have been made to the poverty component. So the poverty component, out of all 6 of the components used in the formula, is the only one that still relies on the 2010-2011 income and expenditure survey data. And this is because the latest IES data was actually released in January of 2025. And as one of the principles that was adopted in the past was the updates that are made to the PES formula can only be limited to the time of the medium-term budget policy statement. And this is because on the day of the medium-term budget policy statement, provincial treasuries receive their preliminary allocation letters, which then would outline what would be considered as the allocations for the next MTEF. And because the data that updates the formula, the process to actually analyze it is quite rigorous and takes time, it is better to then halt any changes to before the medium-term budget policy statement. However, also the letters that provinces receive on the day of the medium-term budget policy statement also start the provincial budget process. So the allocations that then provinces receive on the draft allocation preliminary letter or draft allocation letter that they receive on the day of the MTBPS would have been taken through what we refer to as a phase-in mechanism, which is applied predominantly to cushion provinces from changes that are made to the formula. So a phase-in happens in two instances. So the one instance would be when we do make the annual updates to the PES formula, and this would be between the two MTEF periods. And then also, if there is a special phase-in that we apply to the formula, if there is changes that emanate from a review, or if there's been a huge lag between the data that has been used. So the Technical Committee for Finance did endorse guiding principles for when phase-in or special phase-in can be considered. So this would be in terms of exceptional circumstances. At present, the special phase-in is only considered for the two largest components of the formula, being the health and education, as well as if the changes that emanate, for example, from a review exceed 1%. So for when we implemented the health component, when we had revised the risk-adjusted index, there were changes there that were quite large. So increasing the allocations, some of the provinces that were gained by up to 1.5%, and the losing province being Gauteng, their allocations actually reduced by 3%. So a phase-in mechanism then had to be implemented. So however, there is a fixed period that a phase-in can be applied, and that is only limited to a 3-year period. So by implication, honorable members, what a phase-in does is it then protects the provinces that are losing. So in terms of their smaller reductions being made to their allocations over that 3-year period. And then the provinces that are gaining because of the review, they still get their allocations, however, with the full impact of those allocations or increases being delayed. So in terms of the review and some of the reforms that we have seen, so the review actually started, conversations around the reviews actually started in 2015. And since then, the PES task team was then composed, which then is inclusive of representatives from the National Treasury as well as provincial treasuries. However, as and when the need arises, we do invite certain sector departments, depending on the work that the formula is focusing on at the time. So when we reviewed the health component, we had a lot of engagements with the Department of Health because they are the main policy holders. And then when we reviewed the education component, which is the work that has just been concluded, we did work quite closely with Stats SA as well as the Department of Education. So the purpose of the review is mainly to assess the current data that informs the formula as well as the structure of each component. So this was undertaken in 2 phases, whereas phase 1 reviewed all the data sets that inform the current formula. And here we were trying to see if we're still using credible as well as verifiable data, which is up to date. And this also ensures that the components respond to the demand on the ground. And then in terms of phase 2, this was then mostly the technical work that was done to improve the components in the current structure of the PES. So when I take you through some of the reforms that are going to be introduced in the education component, it then also starts to touch on the current structure of the formula, because it introduces reforms that will change the education component as we know it now. The review is also guided by a set of principles that were endorsed and adopted by the technical budget, by the Technical Committee for Finance, as well as the Budget Council. One of the meetings in the previous years of the Budget Council, so a decision was taken to look at the review in individual components in order to ensure that each of the changes that are made to the component actually try as best as they can to respond to the dynamic needs that provinces are facing. Hence, the review is being, hence the formula is being reviewed in a phased manner. So currently, we have fully implemented the health component. The next one that will be implemented will be the education component. And then once that has been done, it will then open up room to then start looking at all the other components of the formula. So this, honourable members, is just a timeline basically of all of the work that has been undertaken since the beginning of the formula review discussions. So in 2015, a presentation was made to the Budget Council and reviewing the formula was formally endorsed. In 2016 MTEF, Budget Council and the TCF agreed on a set of principles to underpin the PACE formula review. And then when we fast forward now to the 2018 MTEF, where we saw a change in the data methodology that the Department of Basic Education used. So previously, the Department of Basic Education used the SNP survey to collect learner enrollment numbers. However, from 2018, we then started using data that was collected through LURIDS. So LURIDS is a data collection system that is more improved to SNAP survey, because what LURIDS does is then it tracks learners across provinces by using unique identifiers. And with the usage of LURIDS, we are now also able to collect data of learners in special need education centers, which is one of the reforms that we will be introducing in the education component. In the 2019 MTEF, we also saw another change to the education component, honourable members, where the the school-going age population numbers used to solely rely on the 2011 census data. However, we then migrated from the usage of the 2011 census to mid-year population estimates, which are published annually by Stats SA. The latest reform that has been fully implemented now is the health component, where we had a redesigned measure for health risk, and it was introduced into the health component. So this did go through a special phase in, which was over a 3-year period rather. So in terms of the current as well as the future work that we are looking to actually focus on in terms of reviewing the formula. So the first two, they relate to the reforms in the education component. So the two reforms that are going to be introduced in the education component is differentiating the learner population according to socioeconomic background, as well as the inclusion of SNE learners. So I'd mentioned that the exclusion of SNE learners in the education component was previously a legacy of SNAP survey, because SNAP survey did not allow, or did not rather collect data on learners in SNE centers. However, with the introduction of LURIDS, this data has now been available. However, due to the distribution of learners in centers being uneven across the provinces, a resolution was then taken in the TCF as well as the Budget Council to halt the inclusion of these numbers until the work in the differentiating learners was concluded, to allow the changes to then be implemented at the same time. We also are looking at updating data on proportions of poverty. This was work that had briefly been started around 2019. However, with the resolution to then focus on the individual components of the PES, it was then decided to be put on hold for a while. However, these are some of the things that we would be wanting to revisit, of course, in collaboration with the provincial treasuries. Revisiting work on account for costs of providing services in rural areas. This is another area where it was briefly also introduced between 2019 and 2020 to sort of see if we would be able to account for costs that provinces were actually encountering, factoring in the differences in provinces. We also would like to analyze the purpose of the economic component and see how that can better be applied in the formula, assessing the possibility of incorporating variables such as sparsity into other components of the formula. Currently, only the health component accounts for sparsity. In my later slides, I will take you through that in detail. And we also would like to consider the work on the current weight of each component. This, honourable members, is just to indicate and take you through the changes that were actually introduced as a result of reviewing the risk-adjusted index, which is one of the subcomponents of the health component. In the 2022 MTF, we did make changes to the health component, and this was mainly a newly redesigned risk-adjusted index that was introduced in the formula. So what a risk-adjusted index does is it accounts for the burden of disease in a province. When we analyzed or when we reviewed the risk-adjusted index, there was a process in selecting the variables to improve the index, which was guided by principles. Those principles were the data that needed to be used in there needed to be evidence-based, and we needed to see if there were any material differences in healthcare needs between provinces. We wanted to use data that is easily updatable and that had to be drawn from official statistics. So the former risk-adjusted index had been last updated, I think, in 10 years or so. But the newly risk-adjusted index, what it does is we are then able to update the variables that are now part of it after either annually or between 3 to 5 years instead of just holding it static over a longer period of time. So the newly redesigned risk-adjusted index, so the first figure there shows the old risk-adjusted index, which only had 3 variables being age and sex, HIV, as well as maternity. So the redesigned risk-adjusted index still retains the previous variables that were used and however added 3 more new variables into the risk profile of each province. So age and sex was part of the old risk-adjusted index, and this basically measures the relative resource requirements of providing healthcare by age and sex. We then have total fertility rate. Previously, it was only captured as maternity. So this considers the additional burden of providing healthcare services to pregnant women. So a total fertility is basically the average number of children expected to be born to a woman in her lifetime, and this tends to vary substantially between provinces. And then in terms of the 3 new variables that were introduced into the risk-adjusted index is premature mortality, sparsity, as well as multiple deprivation index. So in terms of premature mortality, this serves as a proxy for the burden of disease, including HIV. So the previous risk-adjusted index only considered HIV as a burden of disease to account for the burden of disease in a province. However, premature mortality tends to look at beyond just HIV, but it looks at also traffic accidents that occur in a province, as well as other diseases that might pose a challenge. So what was important also when we looked at premature mortality was that we wanted to also contextualize it into the South African context. So what how then it was defined was then that mortality, so premature mortality would then be defined as deaths occurring before a person reaches 65 years of age. So this is younger than the definition that is used by the World Health Organization, which is 70 years. So the reason why we had to contextualize it to the South African context and actually limit that premature mortality rate to 65 years is because it was to account for the shorter life expectancy that we do see in South Africa. And then sparsity accounts for the additional costs of delivering healthcare in areas that would be considered to have low population density. So that would be a province, say, for example, like the Northern Cape and some parts of Eastern Cape as well can be considered to have low sparsity, low population density. And then we have multiple deprivation index. So in terms of multiple deprivation index, this captures the differences in the social determinants of health between provinces and have a bearing on the health population of that province. So it was included because it was found that there is a link between socioeconomic factors and the social determinants of health. So being education, access to sanitation, amongst other things. Now, honourable members, we come to the PES formula reforms in terms of the education component. So the current education component currently has two subcomponents, being ordinary school enrollment. So this is data that we would be getting from the Department of Basic Education collected through LORITS. And then we also balance that with the age cohort being the 5 to 17 age band. So this is data that is extracted from the mid-year population estimates as published by Stats SA. Now, the current education component treats all learners the same. What we are looking to introduce, honourable members, is to differentiate learners according to their socioeconomic background. So the new education component, what it will do is it will, one, differentiate learners in terms of their socioeconomic background, but also bring in those learners in special need education centers that were previously not accounted for. However, it's important to note that only 5% of the learner population is differentiated in the education component. And this is mainly due to the funding for the norms and standards constituting about 5% of the overall spending in education. So the South African Schools Act requires the Minister of Education to determine norms and standards for the funding of public schools. So because this is we're only differentiating 5% of the enrollment subcomponent, we then have to account for the 5% in the entire component. 10% of the enrollment subcomponent will then be differentiated. And to differentiate those learners, we will be using the National Poverty Distribution Table, which we worked quite closely with Stats SA as well as the Department of Basic Education in its compilation. So the National Poverty Distribution Table describes the distribution of poverty across the country. So what it does then, it establishes targets that treat equally poor learners equally by grouping them into quantiles. These quantiles are generated by ranking household income from lowest to highest and then group them into 5 quantiles. So that is how we're then categorizing these learners into these 5 quantiles. So as I mentioned, this data that has been used to update the National Poverty Distribution Table was compiled by Stats SA, and it was a process that's independent from the DBE process. However, the Department of Basic Education was very much involved as the review was a collaborative effort. The reforms were then presented to the various basic education forums and then later endorsed by the Department of Basic Education through a letter that was written to the National Treasury. this slide, Dr. Fakis will just come in to just expand on the PES working group and all the stakeholders that will be involved going forward in the PES review. Thank you.
Thanks, Selelong, and thanks again to the chairperson and the honourable members. As indicated earlier on, the work on the PES is quite collaborative. It includes various stakeholders, and it is driven by the provinces together with national treasury. So the treasury really acts as a secretariat for this group, the FFC offering their expert knowledge in terms of the research that they conduct, so they are able to help us inform what is working and what could be working better here. And of course, State SA remains the only institution that has been endorsed with the mandate to produce the official statistics for the country. So they work quite well with us in terms of ensuring that, you know, in any reform agenda, the data elements are covered. And one great thing that Elelwang has indicated about the PES formula is that it also uses administrative data. And this is why also as part of the working group, and as and when needed, the sector departments are co-opted, you know, to be part of this group so that they can also offer in terms of how we can bring more information and data that could bring us closer to the accuracy of the work. So all that has been done now, we can categorize as a phase one, which includes the main reforms to the education and the health components. Moving forward, as you could see, there's quite a number of areas that we could be focusing on, and the National Minister of Finance, in one of the Budget Council meetings has invited the MECs to submit topics for the next Budget Council workshop, and the PES review is on the agenda in terms of the progress that has been made and also the next steps. So as this is a policy making body, we await to get the matching orders from them in terms of what will then be the areas to focus on. But from where we are sitting and based on the submissions that have come in, it is very much likely that the next phase, which is phase two, will be looking at the reviewing the weights of the formula itself, given that there are these 6 components with education and health making up quite a substantial part of the weight. There has been some calls to especially look at the weights related to the economic component as well as the poverty component as well. So that is also something that is due to be considered and finalized. But also the review of the 4 components now that are left is also something else that this working group will be tasked with looking at. So there is a meeting that is being arranged to look at that, and while we're doing that, also TCF will be getting feedback in terms of the add-ons that have been made into the formula. So the honourable members would know that there is a small percentage that has been added. I think it's less than 0.5% to the equitable share, which is added outside of the formula for special projects that sometimes affects certain provinces as well. So that as well is under review, and the TCF will be getting feedback and also be providing some way forward in terms of how those will be treated going forward. whether they will be phased into the equitable share or they continue as add-ons into the formula. To just add that the process is also quite stakeholder driven in terms of the inputs that are being received, and those will then depend on the submissions that are finally coming forth from the provincial treasuries as well. Chair, with your permission, I would like to then move to the next set of slides where Mandla will take us through the rollover processes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pakis, and thank you also to the chair and honorable members. In terms of rollovers, we are actually responding to 4.2, and we are starting with 4.2 in terms of the agenda. And we are starting with the legal requirements there that in terms of Section 21 of DORA, it requires that any conditional grant allocation that is not spent at the end of financial year, it must actually come to the National Revenue Fund unless the receiving officer can actually prove to the satisfaction to National Treasury that these are actually committed to the identifiable projects. And obviously 21 also proceeds to say that National Treasury may actually approve the request in terms of a rollover from both national transferring officer and the receiving officer, as well as the provincial treasury. Obviously, this would be if these funds are committed, and Treasury Regulation 6.4 then outlines the criteria in terms of which needs to be applied in as far as this request would be concerned. If we go to the next slide, Ellen Wang, in terms of the criteria, I think obviously it's a common cause that in terms of COE, we will not be approving any application that relates to your compensation of employees. We do obviously approve the transfers, but the approval in terms of a transfer payment, it will be only funds that will be transferred or approved for the original purpose that it was actually meant for. But what is also important to note is that DORA Section 16 also requires that the transfer of Schedule 5 conditional grants to the other organs of state should also be subject to Section 21. Remember, the Section 21 is the one that says that funds that are not spent at the end of financial year in terms of conditional grant must revert back to the National Revenue Fund, and it must follow the rollover process for it to be rolled over. So funds that would be transferred to other organs of states also would be subject to the rollover. And also in instances where at the end of financial year or the end of the financial year of the organ of state differs from our end of financial year in terms of the fact that it's not maybe in March, those must actually come to the National Treasury a month after the conclusion of the financial year end. So in terms of capital, what we consider is funds that would be committed to the identifiable projects. Obviously would require that the tender should have been issued, and we need to get the details of those tenders for each project. And also it must be accepted by the contractor or the supplier. The offer to purchase, what am I saying? The purchase order should be issued. Apologies for that. And also that the invoice should be also there. In an instances where invoices are there and are awaiting payment, obviously we take that would have been a committed funds that needs to be rolled over to the next financial year. So in terms of the application process, next slide, Elelwang, because that is also what we were requested to touch on, that when you look at the process, we kickstart the process in March, where National Treasury will issue the circulars to all provincial treasuries to actually outline the process in terms of the rollover. And in April, or before the end of April, we expect that all provincial treasury should submit the rollover request to the National Treasury. Obviously, they will give that in terms of the details of unspent funds, what would be the rollover request that they are making. And this will also include the transfer to other organs of state. In May, the National Treasury obviously starts the assessment of this rollover request that we would have received. We do the consultation with the national departments as the custodian, obviously, of the conditional grants, and we also consult with the provincial treasury before the approval could be made. And we give the provincial treasuries an opportunity to close gaps if gaps do exist. So it's a consultative process before we come to issuing the conditional conditional approval. And that conditional approval is issued in June. And we issue this so that at least the departments and the provinces can have a sense of whether what they had submitted fit and meet the rollover criteria that would have been set. And obviously the PT then will communicate with their department so that they can know whether their rollover requests are provisionally approved or not. But it is important to also note that we are calling this a provisional approval, obviously subject to the audit process concluded. Once the audit process is concluded and that assessment takes place between September and October, because other annual reports will actually be later than the others, then we confirm to say the figures that would have been submitted and the ones that have been audited now by the Auditor General, are they the same? And then from there we can then give a final approval in November. And that obviously will find its way in terms of the adjustment of the province. And with the final, obviously, allocation letter, then we would be also outlining the process in terms of surrendering those funds that would have not been approved as a rollover, or those that would have not been committed. And I think the last the last slide, Elelwang, just talk about some of the general things that we also need to note is that obviously there would have been those funds, if they are there, that would not be been approved for rollover. So National Treasury is empowered to offset that to the revenue of funds. If those funds have not necessarily been brought back, National Treasury can actually offset the current year's budget to ensure that we adhere to the funds retaining to the revenue, National Revenue Fund. So in an instances, obviously, where the province will receive an additional funds during the adjustment, and I take this would have been the case with our province last year, obviously funds, if they are not spent at the end of financial year, they can actually be applied for or to be rolled over to the next financial year if they are committed. However, we must also indicate the fact that if these funds that are committed had been rolled over to the next financial year, but they actually, or the province, do not necessarily spend the whole amount, that cannot be rolled over for the second time. And I think it answers the question of rolling over the funds over the 2 years. That cannot necessarily be rolled over for the second time. But when you look at the 2 years, I think in one of the meetings, we would have indicated that technically when you look at the funds, you can spend these funds in 2 years. The funds would be approved, or you'd be approved in terms of the adjustment that you received. Is during the adjustment is just almost towards the end of the financial year. So you are able to spend that money in that particular financial year, failing which that money should be committed to the next financial year. So when you look at it, you can spend that money within the 2 financial year. But what cannot happen is that the money cannot be rolled over for the second time. So I think it answers that question that we had. And if you go to the next 2 slides, I think it's just what Michelle would have already indicated. That at the end of the financial year, the money that the province received last year during the adjustment, not all of that money would have been spent. A point in case, we had an amount of 300 million for agriculture, and Michelle is correct, the money was only transferred later in the financial year, almost towards the end of the financial year, because it was the 26th of March. And obviously, there's no way that province would have been able to spend that money. Only, I think, a portion of that was spent, and 270 obviously was not spent at the end of the financial year. There was an application in terms of a rollover, and the total amount of that was actually rolled over to the next financial year. And I think the last slide will just be showing you the other departments that would not have necessarily spent the money. I think when it comes to education, you would remember that the money that flew during the adjustment for education was the BFI. And we're happy to say that they have spent the total amount of that money under education. But for transport, obviously, as reflected there, but there was an amount of, I think, 571 that was rolled, that was adjusted for the disaster for both the department and Cape Nature insofar as the roads are concerned. And obviously, at the end of the year, only 557 was actually spent. Was not spent, apologies for that, was not spent, but the whole amount was applied for the rollover as well. And we were satisfied that the rollover request met the criteria and the conditions in terms of the rollover, because the province could prove in terms of the commitments that the money would have been committed. So safe to say, Honorable Chair, that with the amount of 1.2 that was adjusted last year, not all the amount was spent, but all the amount that was not necessarily spent in as far as the adjustment is concerned, the province was able to prove that the money is committed, and the money was then rolled over to the next financial year, which is the current financial year that we are in. So the point that I was trying to paint earlier, that the challenge that we'll have is if this money now is not spent, it will not necessarily be rolled over to the next financial year, because it has already been rolled over once. And I thought I should just clarify that in answering 4.2. I think that's where I will end it, Chair. Thank you and much appreciated.
I think you are muted, Dr. Pakis. We can't hear you.
Can you
There
hear
we
me
go.
now, Chair?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, no, thanks, Chair, for the time. This concludes our submission to the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you to you and your team, Dr. Pakis. Members, we will now start the discussion based on the presentations received this morning. I would like to request that we start with questions to the Provincial Treasury first, based on the presentation, the first presentation that we received from the Provincial Treasury, so that we can excuse them afterwards, and then we will deal with questions based on the presentation from National Treasury. So members, over to you for questions on the first presentation made by the Provincial Treasury. I see Member Nkondlo and Member Stoffel. Member Nkondlo, you are welcome to start us off.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you, Member Nkondlo.
All right. I think on the first presentation, I just wanted to check something. With the performance of both, I think the social cluster and economic cluster public entities that are sitting at around 70%. Maybe PT can just clarify the issues there. I know they were mentioned, I think, also in the on the financial side, and whether is it a function of challenges of spending on those entities that relates. I think one had seen also as presented there the issue of contracting that would have been delayed so that I think money gets to be spent. So that's my first question, Chair. And then secondly, I think on the on the performance, given that I mean we're always dealing with provincial departments in the main having performed quarter to quarter at most above 70%. I think our focus should always now be more about the quality of that performance. And in that regard, I just wanted to understand, especially on the jobs pillar, that when we look at the jobs, I saw, I think, the Neighborhood Watch as an example, the EPWPs and all of that. I just wanted to understand, maybe to be clarified first, whether EPWPs also classified as part of the job contribution. Secondly, EPWP, what is the period of these EPWP projects? For how long do they spend? Do they spend for more than 3 months, which is more than a quarter? And if so, would they have been accounted for in the previous quarter as also part of the contribution of jobs? If maybe I can just be clarified in that regard. And my last one is that on the key interventions slides, are these selected randomly, or there is some kind of matrix that would say, based on what would have been priorities of the specific departments, we are then pulling these sort of issues that we bring as part of explaining the performance, the quarterly performance of a department. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Stoffel.
Good morning, Chairperson. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you, Member Stoffel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everybody. Chair, mine, I think Member Nkondlo have touched on mine. It's on slide 3. when it comes to the APPs. Really, Chair, I think there the presenters should take us in confidence to give us more reasons for some of these entities not meeting the targets. And they must be more specific in terms of that reasons. And then also, because there's a word partially achieved 22. Now, partially, that's either it's incomplete or complete. You can't. So they must explain more to us why it's incomplete, because when you talk about partially, to me, I will take it as incomplete. So, and then also I want to check with them that since some of them didn't complete or partially complete, are they also forming part of that? They must correct me if I'm wrong. Are they also part of that 804 out of 894 targets achieved? And then my last question, the last sentence, there is 9 that was not been achieved. What is the reason for those not been achieved there? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. Any other members for the first round of questions to the Provincial Treasury? Okay, I do not see any hands. Over to you, Minister Bartman and HOD.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I think on the financial performance of the social and economic cluster, the team can just take us through those particular entities. I see I think it's the Gambling and Racing Board, where there was some underspending on the accommodation for the office and some vacant posts. And I think there was Liquor Authority that was also at 89.3%. There were some construction delays there, and then Casidra, which was at, I think, 81.7%. And I think the other one was Heritage Western Cape, but the team can just take us through those particular public entities and the reasons listed. This is also a summary. The presentation is also a summary of the larger document that has been submitted. And then the rest deals with non-financial performance, which I think .P will be able to assist us with. But I'll hand over to HOD and team before, possibly for .P to just come in on the non-financial performance targets and interventions and the calculations for the respective quarters. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. I wanted the performance team perhaps to go first, because I think it provides, especially as it relates to the entities, and as Minister already indicated, some of the detail around the financial performance of that. But I do think there's a strong correlation between what we see as the outcome on the is part of the reasoning for the financial performance, but it's also got what is happening on the non-financial side. Zinat, will you go first? I see your camera is already on.
Thank you, HOD. I will start with the first question. Or I may not have the questions all in the proper order. The first thing I just want to note is, put that up, please. As part of the social cluster and the question on the social and economic cluster, most of those indicators are actually demand-driven indicators. And we always have, where there is demand-driven indicators, then the department will always have a challenge in terms of measurement, because there isn't the target is based on the demand and the request. So if one look at most of the performance above 70%, and we should look at the quality, I want to just highlight here in terms of the EPWP as mentioned. The measurement there is that EPW is also full-time employment, and we use the full-time employment that is calculated for the numbers. right? Then when we look at that we, in our presentation, I note the members' comment in terms of that we only provide a selected interventions. For the purpose of this presentation, Honourable Member, yes, there's only a selected view that we are sharing. I do want to note that the integrated release that we are, that between Treasury and Department of the Premier that we produce, the detail, there is detail in that release. One can see even in the release, the reasons for the performance is also, and the non-performance is also given. And then one look at more reasons. I think the question was more reasons for some not meeting the targets. Yeah, the report also gives that detail per indicator. It actually gives the detail. And then the question on the partial achievement, it does not form part of the 804, and that is actually a very good observation. Thank you, Honourable Member. When one engages, when the committee engages the individual departments, then the committee could use the report rather than the presentation to actually to engage the departments, and I hope that helps. The one thing that I can also add, it is when the departments start doing the planning, and when they do the first draft APPs and the second draft, and they go through the drafting of the annual performance plans, the technical indicator description guides the department in terms of the policy relevance, in terms of what they are measuring, as it also relates to the PSP. So in the TID, there is allocation is made to actually provide the attribute of that indicator, and that guides everybody in terms of what indicator is linked to growth of jobs, linked to well-being or safety. But that is only indicators that is measured through the annual performance plan. It does not mean that there ain't other indicators that the departments are using to track these priorities. But for the purpose of this presentation and for further engagements with the departments, the departmental annual performance plan, together with the detailed integrated release, are two useful sources to inform any discussion with a particular department. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. I hope I covered everything.
Thanks, Zinat. And maybe just to add, the detail of the reasons for on the spending side is contained on slide 13 in the pack, and we tried to highlight that to the committee, in addition to the detailed explanation that we've also provided with the committee. I think both Zinat and Annalise refer to it, and it will become quite useful when the committee then engage with the various departments. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, HOD. Members, any new questions, follow-up questions to the Provincial Treasury? I see Member Nkonlo. Member Nkonlo, you are welcome to go.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted a follow-up on my response, particularly on the issue of the EPWP. I just maybe to help me understand why would EPWP be regarded as full-time employment, considering that we all know it is not. If you consider what, by employment standards from ILO to even our own labor relations, EPWP is not a full-time employment. So I'm just trying to understand is it a provincial decision? Maybe help me to understand that. That's number one. Number two, if you can also answer me regarding the ones that, because we're dealing with a quarterly performance. So if you're saying in this particular quarter, we would have increased or added this number of jobs and EPWP being a basis thereof, I'm asking whether for the quarter, these are new jobs, or these would have been people that have been contracted, in the previous quarters, because one is just is concerned or looking at the issue of double counting, so that we know the data that we're talking about is not data that will be calculating, also in other months. So that is why I'm asking that question of these numbers that we're dealing with. Are they new numbers for this particular quarter, or there will be numbers that would have been counted also in the other quarters, especially now we're told that it is actually full-time employment? Perhaps you can also even indicate the period, because some of these EPWP, the last time I understood some of them, it would be 3 months, 6 months. They're not the same. But in this context, I'm interested to understand the ones that we have put in this quarterly performance as numbers of our reporting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Any other members? Member Stoffel?
Thank you for the response from from Ms. Ismail. I just want to check HOD and MEC with this smaller mind of mind in this thing, that there was a question that I have asked in terms of the partially achievement. Does they form part of the global achievement of the targets? I didn't hear any answer on that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. Any other members for this round? I don't see any. Minister HOD, over to you and your team.
Thank you, Chair. I think Zenith is going to cover the partially, and apologies for that. Member Stoffel, I think it was just an oversight. Zenith, if you can just maybe touch on again on the how you look at partially achieved, and then we can deal with the EPWP. Okay, thanks.
No, thank you. The EPWP, I think Member Leon van Dijk just answered that. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to say it is full-time equivalent, is a standard form of measure of EPWP. Thank you. And then I also want to add on that it is not, we are not saying that is in contribution to the official statistics. When one measure official statistics through the QLFS, then Stats SA as official producer of employment data, we do separate analysis to say the jobs created quarter on quarter. I just wanted to highlight that, but a person can always have another discussion in terms of job creation and employment. All right. And then the partial and non-partial, we did say it does not form part of the 804 achieved. Did mention that earlier, perhaps I was not clear enough. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Zenith, I think the question was, what do you mean with partially achieved? Is that an acceptable? Yes, thanks.
Yeah, there is a measurement, a technical measurement in terms of partially achieved and not partially achieved. And JB, you could also come in here, but it is certain criteria that has been used. If it's above, I think it's 75% or so. Yes, between 50 and 99%. right, if a target has not been achieved. But one must also take into account that we have now presented also the pre-audited data. So the audited data may actually show have a different result because some of those indicators may have been fully achieved. JB, do you want to come in?
Sina, no, you responded well. The past achievement is to indicate that the budget has been achieved fully, but we're on our way within the annual to reach that. And that's why I think we've incorporated the pre-audit and corrected this between an achievement of 50 to 99%.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HOD. Members, final round of questions to the Provincial Treasury. I see Member Petrus. Any other members for a final round to Provincial Treasury? Member Petrus and Member Nkondlo. Member Petrus, you can go.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Can we perhaps have a breakup of the crime rate of the different regions and towns of the Western Cape?
Thank you, Member Petrus. I would suggest that we deal with that in our committee resolutions. Member Nkondlo.
Yes, Chair. I think, Chair, we will have to either do that in the committee resolutions, especially because I'm not satisfied with the response on the EPWP numbers, and I just want to put it up front. I in no way, suggesting that colleagues are actually, responsible for labor data that we all know comes quarterly. But for the purpose of what Provincial Treasury reports to us, and if you put something as part of the strategy that the department or the province had said, we are having this strategy of growth for jobs, and therefore we shall be reporting on progress that we are making quarter by quarter, in terms of the activities that we are contributing to, which we are financing based on our budget. Surely we need to get some clarity of when we put those numbers, what is it? So I'm really wanting. I don't want to drag this discussion on this matter. Perhaps we would need guidance, Chair, from your side. Because I think also the response was saying maybe we can have further discussion. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe we would need indeed that further discussion to just clarify for someone to understand, including the notion of double counting that I was asking about these numbers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. The next person was Member, let me just check here, apologies. Member Masipa.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the department for the presentation. Chair, just a question from my side relates to the grant, obviously, that was delayed due to the budget challenges. I just want to know if that delay has been resolved in terms of really getting the allocation going directly to like the CAS grant. Obviously, were affected by this, but I mean maybe also how the municipalities that also relied on the conditional grants, they have already been allocated those particular grants. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa and Member Stoffel.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm also not really comfortable with the crime stats that was being given there. But so I think what you have suggested in terms of maybe we can take that discussion further within the committee. I think it's a wise decision for the committee so that we can see, because what is happening now currently in our province when it comes to crime, it doesn't just add up with me in terms of that stat. So in terms of to be really accurate and accuracy, we need to take that in the committee discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. Okay, there we go. Minister and HOD, over to you first. I see your hand, Minister Bartman.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think, Chair, maybe in order to assist, because between .P in terms of the non-financial performance and the respective departments in government, we do use official data. And a lot of that official data stems from Stats SA. So not trying to tell the committee which stakeholder to engage, but it might be useful for the Premier Committee just to engage Stats SA on how they put respective data together. But I just want to check quickly if Dr. Ishmael can't maybe just quickly just explain like how is it cumulative, the quarterly performance, for example, that .P puts together, or is it per quarter? This is, for example, 5 + 5 + 5 = 15, or is it 15, 17, 19 cumulative? I think that's more in terms of that question. Chair, I didn't really hear properly Member Masipa's question regarding the municipalities and conditional grants. Maybe if he just wants to repeat that one. And then just I would recommend that because crime data does sit with POCs as well as SAPS, and then some of it does come through, some official data comes from other stakeholders, that the POCs committee might want to, or the safety committee might want to also then go through some of that official data, because the crime data that we have is more the recent data and official data that gets publicized. But maybe if SAPS perhaps has data that goes into particular areas, then maybe the safety committee might want to interrogate some of that. But I just wanted to quickly check with HOD regarding the conditional grants and the transfers and that type of allocations. And then maybe a doc, if you want to maybe just quickly go through the cumulative versus non-cumulative nature of the performance data. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I think there's two things here. The first thing it is the data. What we try to present it is the socioeconomic picture and what we think a government is doing or what a particular department is doing. So when one look at Stats SA's data, then Stats SA does release the QLFS, quarter labor force data, quarter on quarter. And they quarter on quarter also give the whether they give the labor participation rate, or we could actually disaggregate that to gender and youth. And if I may, I can just very quickly just to reassure the members, just kind of show, this is like the recent data that just came out 2 days ago, where Stats SA actually present this data, and you can see there's the QLFS data and so forth. All right. So when we look at, we stop sharing EPWP work opportunities. And rightfully in the chat box, the full-time equivalent is a standard form of measure of EPWP. What we have done, we have only highlighted the DSD as contribution to EPWP as a highlight in relation to an indicator, a performance indicator in DSD APP, Annual Performance Plan. It means that DSD will have that administrative data in their operating systems, and so other departments that also contribute to EPWP, they also have data. But we did not present that holistic picture on EPWP. What we did was highlighting a very important indicator to show that DSD in this fourth quarter have created work opportunities of 873 via the EPWP. If one has to look at EPWP as a contribution to the broader growth of jobs, then that, what we have presented, is not the same. We've only taken one part, which is DSD, and highlight that. One need to look at all the EPWP measurements across all the departments that contribute to show that basket or that total EPWP employment opportunities. So I trust I've helped. Thanks.
Thank you, Zinat. I see through you, Chair. I'm sure Zwak would like to add. So if we can maybe just give him an opportunity.
Yeah, maybe just to support what Zinat said. The cumulative or the collective data in the province is gathered by the Department of Infrastructure. So they will accumulate all that data on the EPWP. But as Zinat indicated, for this purpose, we only extracted social development. Now, in the TID, the technical indicator description, they have a non-cumulative setting for calculation of those figures, where other departments will have cumulative. So they're all different. But at the end of the year, when the reporting is required, Department of Infrastructure will be responsible to collectively bring a total together on that.
Chair, if I may, there was a question on the grants by member
Masipa.
Masipa, yes. So I think we given the delay in the process, we obviously had to wait for the appropriation and the division of revenue, but we are ready to pay. We have already drafted the memorandum of agreements as well as the allocation letters. They are ready, but we can only proceed once the Gazette has been published, and that is already in process, and we are looking at publishing potentially early next week, and then we can let the funding, the rest of the processes will then kick in to ensure that municipalities get get certainty and the allocation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HOD. Member Nkondlo, final word on this question.
Yes, Chair. I wish to submit, Chair, that maybe let's indeed leave this discussion for resolutions, because I don't want members of the provincial treasury and officials to create an impression here, that we are confused or misunderstanding what they are presenting, because now we'll be speaking parallel to each other. We have not, I personally was asking the question, have not made the claim that I'm assuming that by the numbers of Department of Social Development that represent a contribution of the province, in totality. I'm asking specifically that particular number as a percentage contribution to the bigger number, which I think Mrs. Smile is correct to say, perhaps maybe when we get to the engagement with the Department of Infrastructure, if all of these numbers are coordinated there. But the point one needs to understand, at this sub-level, because to understand that particular aggregation, if we cannot first and foremost understand the calculation and how you brought that information, as a basis of explaining highlights of work that is being done, and now when we're asked, it's like, we're not understanding, who is responsible for stats. And I don't think this is the question that we're asking. So I would suggest, Chair, that indeed, perhaps we may need in that conversation, or at some point bring back Treasury, if Treasury would like to bring or would suggest it's best to bring the Department of Infrastructure specifically on how the EPWP contribution gets to be collected by the sector departments and totalized by the Department of the Premier into the contribution that goes to Stats SA. I think that could also be a very good thing to do, so that we better understand. Again, the issue of understanding, the full-time equivalent sort of nature of EPWP, and whether, as it says, it's calculated cumulatively or not, to avoid a double counting. For me, those issues are still not answered. And I would have thought, if I'm made to understand just with this small number of DSD, to understand how that process of those numbers in terms of qualifying them as an indicator, as it has been said, that has been pulled through as an achievement of this specific department, so that I'm able to understand now when it's all aggregated with all other numbers. So I would want us to leave it there, so that indeed, you see, the nature of this conversation is that we need to understand what the department is presenting to us. We need to leave this having understood what the department is presenting to us on behalf of the constituencies. So there's no point, indeed, when we are in a conversation, we can't find each other, because then it means we are living with information that is not necessarily correct. So I'm just asking, Chair, that maybe that suggestion we're making of taking this matter to the resolutions and finalizing it there, so that we can have a comeback of having a clear understanding. And I like what I see in the portfolio committees at National Assembly. That allowed dialogue between one member and the department, so that we get to a point where we understand each other. Because now this nature of engagement, and somebody comes back after 2 or 3 other questions, and you feel that the person is not answering what you had asked. I think it helps. We would maybe need to consider that approach that is done at National Assembly, so that we can, at least by the time we conclude with questions, we understand each other, both the member and also the department.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. I would like to afford Dr. Ishmael the final word on this.
Yeah, I hear the member's concern, and I just want to note that the Quarter Labour Force Survey is a household survey, and the department does not submit administrative data that feeds into a quarterly labour force survey. Thank you. So it's not what I'm trying to, just to give the member comfort, it's not double counting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. HOD and Minister, opportunity for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing specific from my side. I think there's a lot of homework that we will consider in terms of our joint work between .P and PT, both on the financial side and the non-financial side. And as always, we'll do our best in order to continue innovating upon the data that we bring before committee. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you. I was just going to indicate or to say, and I'm sure that the committee is aware of it, and because we are presenting both departments consolidate the information and we present it as such, I wanted just to to highlight the fact that in terms of mandate, the performance information is with the Department of with the Premier in terms of consolidation. But Zinat is quite correct. That is from the APP, and the further detail one can then obtain from the various departments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, HOD, to you and your entire team, as well as officials from the Department of the Premier and Minister Bartman. Thank you so much for joining our committee meeting this morning. You are now welcome to leave the meeting while we conclude with the presentation from National Treasury. Or you are most welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got a lot of other important things to do on this Friday morning. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, members, we will now deal with the second part of the presentation that was from the National Treasury. And you are now welcome to pose your questions to the National Treasury based on the presentation received from them earlier this morning. I see Member Petrus to kick us off. Member Petrus, you are welcome to start.
Chairperson, thank you again. I have a problem with the rollover situation, Chairperson. How does it affect the credibility of the budget? If you know you're not going to spend the money or the funds, but you still apply for it or you still budget for it, and then you know you're just going to ask for a rollover later during the year. I have a problem with that, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Petrus. Member Nkondo.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, maybe also with your guidance, that I'm not sure whether we'll still be able to discuss the first part of the presentation of National Treasury, which was verbal. I'm not sure what is your guidance on that matter. Should we proceed on it?
Yes, Member Nkondo. My thinking was that when we get to resolutions, to definitely request a formal presentation on that agenda item. But if you could recall the remarks made by Dr. Pakis, you are more than welcome to ask questions on his remarks on that agenda item. So you can continue.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe just a few things in what Dr. Pakis raised. He did indicate that National Treasury don't monitor, but sector departments, especially in terms of, the implementation of some of the community vulnerable groups and the likes. Now, I'm trying to understand then, Dr. Pakis, one, there is a notion you said there is a 30% of community inclusion that is supposedly, I'm not sure whether I'm using the right term, is an obligation, for the implementation of some of these projects, as you had referred. Now, I just want to understand, will that definition of what community inclusion and community participation, will that definition be found in the sector department policies, or does National Treasury, specifically as allocating, as a budget allocating department, also be able to provide or share such with us? And I'm raising this because this has always been a serious, especially as you related to the issue of of grants, as it relates to your informal settlement upgrading grants and others. So I'm interested to know whether such instrument or clarity would be maybe found in the sector departments. Secondly, then how do you, as National Treasury, then able to verify some of the national priorities, which would move from an MTEF now is MTDP, if then you are not involved in the actual monitoring, because you provide budgets in accordance to these national priorities. And I think your colleague also did mention that provinces are also allowed to determine priorities and allocate budget. So who ensures that there is alignment between what is in the national priorities and then what the province would then, after having received the allocation in terms of that prioritization. So I'm interested just to understand that sequencing and ensuring that there is alignment, and also to ensure that at least the money that has been given to provinces also considers, the national objectives that have been set and agreed to as, the national strategies. So I just wanted to just understand that at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Member Nkondlo. Member Stoffel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mine is also on the rollover. Chair, I don't have a problem with the money that has been rolled over to the next financial year or whatsoever. Remember, when a department budgets, it budgets for the current necessity, and then also it should spend that money. But now there is millions being rolled over to the same department without any timeline. I'm not sure whether in the presentation it was been indicated whether that rollover money will be coupled with a timeline in order for that department to have also to spend also the actual budget of that specific department. And my view is that if you've got so many roll over to the same department, obvious, it's very clear that department will sit once again with the underspending, even in the next 5, even before the end of the financial year. So this department will every time have a rollover. Yes, the rollover can be done with after you have done a rollover. But if you have faced a new financial year, which means that money will go to that new financial year over that 2 years that they are talking about. So I'm not sure whether my clarification is seeking question is captured. I'm not sure how to put it, but this is my small understanding around this rollover. If you don't spend, it's been rolled over to the next year, but at least National Treasury should then look into a timeline for that money to be spent, because we found a big problem that rollovers has been done whilst there is a need in our communities where we are staying. People don't have houses, people don't have this, there's a lot of shortage, and there's money that has been rolled over. So thanks, Chair. I just want to be clarified on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. Over to you and your team, Dr. But let's give the last opportunity to Member Boyson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I've been listening to the presentations, and Chairperson, I want to side with Member Nkondlo that it would do no harm going forward, and probably in the resolutions we can indicate as such that the EPWP and the rollovers, because it is still fresh in our minds being former councillors, we understand the EPWP and the FTE is how it works. and we were actively involved in that. Hence, we've been quiet all along with the deliberations. But it would do no harm, Chairperson, if the different departments where this resides and where the bulk of questions has been focused on come and give an explanation, because again, Chairperson, even with rollovers, there are projects within government in its initial stages that it does indicate that it would be a multi-year project, and surely in multi-year projects there will be rollovers. But also, in my limited understanding, is that there is a cap in terms of what should be the percentage spent within that specific financial year. That also gives an indication on whether a department is lacking or not. And that then also allows rollovers. If you did, for instance, it would say you must spend up to 80% of your budget in your multi-year project, but you can't ask for a rollover if you're sitting at 40% at the end of the financial year. So those explanations would then just refresh all of us going forwards by the relevant departments. It's just a suggestion, but I side with Member Kondlo. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Boyson. Dr. Pakis, over to you and your team for responses.
Leave Dr. Pakis to do his job, Member Boyson.
Members, please, we are nearing the end of our discussion. Dr. Pakis, over to you and your team.
Dr. Pakis, I think I see you are unmute, but I could not hear you speak. I don't know if it's only a challenge from my side.
No, we also battling to hear him. Just give him a sec.
Even now, Honorable Chair?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, no apologies. I don't know what happened there. I was thanking the honorable members for the questions, indicating that a lot of them are on the rollover. So I'm going to ask Mandla to come in on those, and then I can come in at the end and deal with those that would be outstanding, but also the ones related to Member Kondlo's question on the policy around the communities and the SMEs involvement in the process. Thanks.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Dr. Pakis, and also let me thank Honorable Petrus, Honorable Stoffel, and Honorable Boyson for their comments and question in as far as the rollover is concerned. And I think the first concern is with regard to the credibility in terms of the budget. And I must also indicate that Honorable Petrus, you are correct that it has that somewhere somehow it will also point to the issues in terms of lack or poor of planning from the department side in terms of spending. And I think safe to say that yes, your comment and concern is noted. But I must also point out to some of the positive effects in as far as of rollover is concerned. I think when you look at how the rollover process is designed, and insofar as the adjustment is concerned, when you look at the amount, and I think members would have raised the very same concern in when we were presenting to you last in terms of adjustment, was that when you look at the amount of money that you have actually given the department in here, practically it will be challenging for them to be able to spend that money in year. But when you look at it again, the need is there for them to be able to spend that money, and at the same time also when you look at the time, it might be a challenge for them. That's why the rollover actually exists, and in my view also it also avoid the issue of wanting to spend money in a haste, just because the year is about to end and you end up having what we call a fiscal dumping. If the money is well committed, and it can be spent in the next financial year, then we maintain that continuity to say that if the money is committed by law, the law allows that the money can be spent in the other financial year, but we must satisfy ourselves in terms of commitment. So how I'm answering that question, Member Pretres, is to say one knows obviously the concern that this might actually bring, and particularly with the unintended consequences in terms of the perpetual underspending that the department would be sitting with, but also taking into account that it also allows that the projects can be concluded, particularly those projects that are actually spending well, and they are spending within the framework which they were supposed to be spending with. Because as we implement projects, there are other things that comes in that causes delays towards projects, and just to simply say maybe we won't necessarily be given rollover. It will actually be punitive, not necessarily to the people in the department, but it will actually be subjecting our people on the ground towards that punitive measure that would be putting. But safe to say, we've noted the comment. Member Stoffel raised the issue of the underspending year in, year out, and I want to agree with her that when you look at how maybe we deal in terms of your year in, year out, that's why there is a provision that we cannot roll over the same project. We cannot do the rollover for the second time. The rollover will only be done once in a financial year. In terms of the timelines, we actually say that show us your schedule in terms of how you are going to spend your rollover in as far as this money that you are getting. But the timeline obviously would be limited to that particular financial year. So it's also subjective because the department might actually spread that throughout the financial year. And we also take into consideration that there are projects that would be planned for that particular financial year in which the rollover will be falling into, that would still need to be carried through along with the rollover that they would have actually received. But there is a provision in terms of monitoring. In as far as the conditional grants is concerned, that if the province or the department is not necessarily moving insofar as certain conditional grants are concerned in terms of spending, we have that provision to stop and reallocate the funds towards different provinces that would actually be spending on it. So this is one of the mitigating factors to make sure that when funds are being allocated in terms of conditional grants are actually being spent, and we reduce the risk of perpetually underspending in terms of conditional grant. Member Boyson, in terms of the percentage, and I've noted your comments, the percentage in terms of you cannot necessarily have the rollover when you have not spent a certain amount of money. I don't think that's what we implement from our side, or there's the provision that exists insofar as the provinces is concerned in terms of how much do you you are supposed to have spent. What is important is the commitment for us to satisfy ourselves in terms of the commitment. But indeed, we do obviously would time to time monitor the expenditure based on the percentage that at a certain time of the year, the spending must be at a certain level, or the expenditure must mirror the planning that you would have submitted to us, because in terms of Section 40 of the PFMA, the provinces are allowed to send us their planning their spending planning to say at this particular point we would have been at this particular time. We do consider the percentage in terms of tracking the spending, but not necessarily to determine how much we can actually roll over to the next financial year. So I thought that is I've covered my questions, Dr. Pakis, in as far as the conditional grants is concerned. I'm happy to come in if there's something that I've left. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Members, any follow-up questions or new questions to the colleagues from National Treasury?
Sorry, Chair. If I can come back, Chair, there was the question from Member Nkondlo around the process and ensuring the priorities. I'm not sure if you can see my screen. I've just tried to project one of the conditional grants framework, which is the municipal infrastructure grant, which I would like to use as an example. Based on this framework, so the outcome statement for this framework includes the labor-intensive construction methods where feasible and economically viable. Now, we then move to the outputs, which means this is now the deliverable of this grant, which also speaks to the question on the work opportunities that get to be created around this grant as well. And most importantly, perhaps I want to zoom into the priority, which is priority 5. This is where now these grants and the funds that are flowing from these grants are specified in terms of the national priorities. And this framework is the framework of the Department of Cooperative Governance, which then acts as a grant administrator. So the responsibility is on them to then ensure that they follow through in terms of all the deliverables that have been put in this grant. They have to monitor and ensure that there is reporting on the number of jobs that are being created and the target groups that this grant benefits from this grant. And then they're also responsible for reporting in terms of priority 5 on human settlements and local government as well. So that's the accountability cycle that is then built into the conditional grant framework. The Auditor General also audits this in terms of ensuring that there is adherence to the provisions in the framework. So the Department of Cooperative Governance, again, would then need to answer to the department to AG in terms of how far they have gone in terms of ensuring that the spending agencies, in this case the municipalities, have kept the conditions of this framework. So there's a number of these honorable members. I mean, there's this provision here also that they need to ensure that the money that this grant buys, at least 20% of it, applies the labor-intensive methods in it. There are similar grants that also do the same. So from our side, then, honorable members, we would then apply what Mandla has spoken to in terms of the provisions now within the division of revenue. So the allocations are made upfront and they are published, and then the transfers are made according to the strict schedules and conditions that are applied. So if there is non-adherence to these, then the sector departments involved would then initiate the process of engaging with us to say a certain municipality has failed to report on this, which is a condition in the grant framework. Therefore, we would like you to withhold the funds, which is also another avenue that we have now to ensure that we try and enforce these national and local priorities as well, by ensuring that there is where things are not going well, funds can be withheld, eventually stopped, and where possible also be reallocated to other municipalities or provinces that are doing well. And all the spending is done, and it must be reported and evaluated for compliance and effectiveness by the grant administrating department, which in this case would be the Department of Cooperative Governance. So there are those systems and checks and balances in place. From our side, we follow the financial aspects of the funds, and the department, which is grant administering, would then follow the financial part of it, and together with DPME would then report on the non-financial portions of it, and we will then report on the financial aspects of the funds. These remain the policies of the said national departments in terms of what is being tried to achieve. So each grant framework is a response to a policy, a document within the department. So when you see this 20%, it is 20% that comes from a policy document of government that this department is then responsible for in terms of ensuring that there is delivery on the ground. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Pakis. Members, back to you. Member Masipa, you are the first member, and Member Nkonlo the second for now. Member Masipa.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the National Treasury for their presentation. Chair, I just want to really ask the National Treasury in terms of the lesson learned. The issue that we have picked up is that the BFI or the Triple P on infrastructure, the uptake from municipalities other than the metro is very low. And the need to really increase the uptake is there. I just want to really understand from the National Treasury as to which areas can obviously the provincial government and the national government assist this municipality so that there could be an increase in terms of appetite for BFI or Triple P. I don't know. Yeah, I think they are one and the same. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa. Member Nkonlo. Member Nkonlo.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for that.
No, it's fine, thanks.
No, thank you to Dr. Pakis for the explanation, because I think he explains, which I think makes sense, that between them, Treasury, DPME, and the grant administering department, which is the sector department, I think this work of ensuring that what is in these conditions of this grant, is supposedly to be managed at that level. And I am not sure, Dr. Pakis, the extent of the agility, of this ecosystem, because I'll tell you why. One, for me, would have been these communities which, there are these grant conditions where, for example, the municipality, is not including communities, where do they go? What is their recourse? If such is not happening, Two, who ensures that even these communities, SMMEs, vulnerable groups, are aware of these rights that they do have, in the process of the implementation and administration of these grant conditions, because this has been a glaring error or area from where I'm sitting. I'm not sure whether Dr. Pakis is something in your end as Treasury, although maybe you would have picked up, but it's something that I think for me is a concern about community involvement, community beneficiation, an obligation that is stated in grant conditions, but the actual communities, are not necessarily aware of this. And this is why you find these tensions between the actual implementers in the departments, sector departments, and the communities themselves. Because if there was harmony as per, the intentions, the good intentions of these policies, I'm sure we'll be seeing a little of a reduced sort of these sort of violent service delivery protests, especially around issues of housing, informal settlement, upgrading, and the likes. And I'm sure perhaps one of the things I would request as part of what you are still going to send us as per the initial request we have made, if you could either highlight to us, where can we get these guidelines? As you had said, others are in COGTA. If you do have some of them, you can just share with us so that it also empowers us as members, to read through and understand those grant conditions. But also, Chair, I just wanted to also make comment and want to understand with Treasury, especially around, the reforms that are being mooted on the PS as it has been explained. I think there is an issue that we have always been dealing with around the alignment or not so alignment of the grant allocations, especially, on CASP, that actually always arrives later for the likes of agriculture, especially the likes of CASIDRA, to allocate to the projects and beneficiaries that would have been, applied. So that alignment of when the money gets to be allocated is something that has been raised, including by municipalities, to say because their financial year end is not the same with a national and provincial government. This is an area that actually disturbs, proper planning, budgeting, and spending. And I'm not sure in the reforms whether it is a matter that is being attended to on how such could be improved, because somewhat it does cause, these underspending, which are technical in nature, because it is a function of that misalignment of the grant allocation to the varied municipalities by, the grantees, the grantor, which is actually a national treasury in this sense, to the province and, to the municipalities. So I just want to understand whether that is something that is actually being handled. Then the other one is on the capacity on the CAPEX project. Because one of the things we're seeing is the increase, and I see in the province, one of the ways in which provincial government would have thought of trying to, coordinate this work better is to consolidate capital projects under the infrastructure, which is, I think, the rationale of the establishment of the infrastructure department. I'm just trying to understand from Treasury, is there a specific unit that is actually dealing with oversight of these capital projects? I listened to the colleague as was presenting of the times at which National Treasury expect departments and provinces to submit, their approved contracts, the letters, that is purchasing orders and all of that. Is there a specific a unit within Treasury that is actually responsible, in looking at all of these and capacitated enough so not to delay, some of the approvals that will be needed, by provinces? I just want to understand, I think, that aspect, I think, in the process. And safe to say, I think, as it was explained, that there is an extensive consultative and stakeholder engagement, including, and which I think one is encouraged to hear about the reforms in the PES, especially because there are a lot of developments in terms of population, in terms of also including the learners of special needs, into, the data that gets to inform the component of education. But I'm also, as one of the people that have always been raising the notion of the economic component, that is a conversation that is actually, forming part of the reforms. And I think one needs to just appreciate, I think, that work that is being done. Obviously, the actual this is going to be a function of the detail once those reforms get to be done, as things are changing, I think, in the country. So I just also wanted to appreciate, I think, that robustness that was coming through with the presentation of the colleagues, which demonstrate that even the issues that have been raised in the province, and I'm sure with also other provinces, are being taken into consideration in the reforms that are being that are taking place within the whole notion of the equitable share formula. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Mkondlo. Dr. Pakis, you and your team, if you can please wrap up on the answers within 5 minutes. We are running out of time, and we still have to deal with some administrative committee issues. So if you can respond to some of the questions and comments for a final round. Thank you.
That's it. I'm gonna do it differently this time around because in all these reforms we're not working alone. With our very supportive colleagues, Annelise, Stephen, and Diane, and Michelle are here. So I think they might also want to weigh in on some of these issues. But I'm going to ask Mandla as well to touch on the CASP issues around the lateness of transfers there. But just to sum it up, honorable members, is that there's a lot of work from the conditional grants process, a review that is happening in terms of looking at the system as a whole, how it's working and how it can be improved, and some of the bottlenecks in terms of how to resolve some of the issues as they are being reported. Some issues you would find that they are sector specific due to lack of perhaps capacity, especially at the national level, which would then see the late approvals of the business plans and so forth. So those issues are also being looked at with the view of improving that. But we always welcome the support and the views that are coming from our counterparts in the provinces in terms of what is not working well and how the system can then be improved. But I would like my colleagues to just come in and just touch on those issues, especially our provincial colleagues as well.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Dr. Pakis. And I think from my side, Honorable Masip, I think on the issue of BFI, the lessened land, obviously one would not necessarily have those all of those lessened land, but your observation in terms of the city and the metro, I think from my side, I will actually liken it into the provinces such as your likes of Western Cape and Gauteng, and some of the other provinces that are in the rural. You find that in most cases, provinces, I think at this point, Western Cape has been the main beneficiary in terms of the BFI application. So you still find that in other provinces that are more because of a lack of a better word, more of a rural provinces have been, I think, struggling in terms of putting together the applications, but it's mainly in terms of putting together the shovel readiness projects so that it can be able to be supported. And I believe within the BFI unit there is actually a support structure that would have actually built in to be able to support some of these provinces that are actually are struggling. But one of the thing that has been done now is to allow multiple windows within a year. We used to have only one window within a year for a submission, but now we've got 4 windows within a year for provinces to be able to bring together or to put together the plan for them to be able to be funded through BFI. And I think Honorable Nkondlo raised an important element in terms of the alignment of the financial years to say whether it's part of the reform now. And I think it's not something that I can say, at least at this point, the alignment of the financial years would be part of the reform. But safe to say that in terms of your conditional grant, your CASP, that normally comes late is something that has been raised sharply now with the provincial visits that we've been having with Western Cape and also with all other provinces. This has been an issue, and we are taking it up from our side as well to engage with National Department of Agriculture to raise some of these issues that would actually be affecting the provinces negatively. I think for now I'll end there, Dr. Pakis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we are running out of time. There's just 7 minutes left, and we still have to do resolutions and some committee documents. So at this point in time, I would like to thank the National Treasury for joining us this morning. Thank you for your presentation and for the way in which we were able to have these sorts of discussions this morning. We will be writing to you about the second point on the agenda, which Member Nkondlo also raised. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate your time. You are welcome to leave the meeting now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, thank you. We will now deal with the second last point on our agenda for today's meeting, which is the consideration and adoption of draft committee documents. Mr. Davids, if you can take us through the first document.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I'm just wanting to share quickly the window with you, Chairperson. If you can just give me a second, please.
I just want to check with you. It says 5 minutes left of this meeting. Will we be kicked off, or will we be able to go to just
I
finish?
think that we'll just go. Yeah, we'll just go over a little bit, Chair.
Okay, perfect. No, that's fine.
Chair, I would like to submit the draft meeting minutes, Chair, of Wednesday, the 9th of July, Chairperson. Chairperson, as you can see, all the members, they were present. There was an apology from Member Mbombo on that day, Chairperson. Chairperson, this was the last meeting in terms of the division of revenue bill, Chairperson. Chairperson, the committee basically supported the bill, Chairperson, and there were no additional resolutions or requests for information, Chair. That was in the minutes of the 2nd of July. That was already adopted by the committee and submitted to the various departments for implementation and briefing, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder? Members, someone to propose and second the adoption. Mr. Davids, if you can. Member
I
Masipa
propose, Chair.
and Member
I propose.
Stoffel. Thank you so much,
Sure.
Member Masipa and Member Stoffel. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, if I can just go to the next one quickly. Let me just load this document, Chairperson. Chairperson, this is just basically the draft quarterly report of the Budget Committee Chair. Chairperson, basically this is from April 2025 to June 2025, Chairperson. As per the norm, there's just the committee membership, which has been noted, Chair. The mandate of the committee chairperson, as per the standing rules of WCPP, Chairperson. And then, Chairperson, just to the main part of the report, just to indicate that there were 4 meetings, Chairperson, which is the 3rd of May, the 14th of May, Chairperson, the 3rd of June, and the 11th of June, Chair. And Chairperson, most of the members, they were co-rated, Chairperson, for the Budget Committee, Chairperson. There were some apologies which has been noted, Chairperson, but most of the members were in the meetings, Chair. Chair, then basically just with the legislation finalized, Chair, it was the Western Cape Appropriation Bill, Chair, which basically went into the first quarter, Chairperson. So that was documented, Chair, because it was just a trickle over into the first quarter, and that necessitated the need to for this capturing of this bill that the committee did, Chairperson. And then, Chairperson, there was no international study tours, visits, no invites, Chairperson, no conferences or workshops to attend. Chair, the committee was allocated for the year 186,111 rand, and the total expenditure, Chairperson, was at the 30th of June, 36,021 rand, Chair, and there's a balance of 150,090 rand, Chairperson, which basically will be used for the upcoming adverts, Chair, for the Division of the Revenue Amendment Bill in November, as well as the Western Cape Appropriation Adjustments Bill in November, and as well as the Appropriations Bill in October next year, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, any amendments, or can I ask for a proposer and a seconder? Member Masipa, I see your hand. Are you proposing or amending?
I'm proposing that we accept the report. Thanks to Mr. Davis for the presentation.
Thank you, Member Masipa, and someone to second. Any permanent member of the Budget Committee, Member Stoffel. Thank you so much, Member Stoffel. I appreciate that. Mr. Davids, I believe there's one more document that we have to deal with.
Just one more document, Chairperson. I'm just bringing that up, Chair. Is the annual activities report of the Budget Committee, Chairperson. Chairperson, just from 1st of April 2024 till the 1st of March 2025, Chair. Once again, the membership, Chair, that was noted for the year under review, the mandate of the committee according to the standing rules, Chairperson, the departments, Chair, which is basically the Budget Committee oversees, engages Provincial Treasury, Chairperson, on a quarterly basis, Chair. Chair, for the year under review, Chair, seeing that the 7th Parliament opened up in June, July, Chairperson. Chair, there were 7 committee meetings, and those 7 committee meetings constituted 7 public hearings, Chair, and there were 2 public provincial bills that were considered, Chair, and 1 NCOP bill that was considered, Chairperson. And basically, Chairperson, I just took it on a quarter by quarter narrative, Chairperson, all the meetings that the committee has had, Chair, which is contained in this document, Chair, in the report, and the legislation, Chair, which is the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill that we had in November, Chairperson, as well as the Western Cape Additional Adjustments Appropriation Bill, Chair, that was also that we had, Chairperson, and then in March, Chair, we have the Western Cape Appropriation Bill, Chair, that the committee dealt with, Chairperson. Chairperson, we cannot put in, Chair, the Western Cape door, the Western Cape Division of Revenue Bill, Chair, because we only dealt with that in July. So, Chair, that will be in the next annual activities report, Chairperson. And then, Chairperson, if we go to the financials once again, the committee was allocated 90,000 rand, had a total expenditure of 73,458 rand, and there was a surplus of 16,542 rand, Chairperson, at the end of the financial year under review.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, I don't think there's anything we can amend to this report, the annual activities report. But if there are any corrections, please, you are welcome to indicate so. But with that being said, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder on this report? Member Stoffel, thank you very much. And Member Masipa, thank you very much, members. Okay, Mr. Davids, does that conclude our committee reports?
Yes, Chairperson, that concludes the administrative side of the committee's report, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, we will now deal with our resolutions. I would just like to upfront say that we have, yes, Member Masipa, I'm sure you want to add to the resolutions. I just want to say that up until this morning, or actually up until the meeting started, myself and the procedural officer we weren't sure whether National Treasury will be attending our meeting this morning because they have not accepted the meeting invite or responded to my letter. So apologies for also not receiving a presentation in advance. As I've just said, we weren't really sure whether they will be present here this morning or not. So I just want to apologize for not being able to send you any presentations up front. But with that being said, before I hand over to Mr. Davids to just share with the committee the resolutions that he noted during the meeting, Member Masipa, you are welcome to go.
Oh, thanks very much, Chair. Chairperson, I think Honorable Ngonto will also maybe make some inputs here. I think we're going to be under huge pressure in terms of the support from national, whereby municipalities might really need to raise private money to lend to their finances, support the projects, especially on infrastructure side. So I was wondering if one of the resolution, we look at maybe, I don't know which area the BFI really resides, whether it resides in the finance side or there is an infrastructure, obviously, where Dean talks about, Honorable Minister McPherson talks about, creating South Africa a construction site. But I think that's one of the areas that we might have to engage a little bit to really see how really, as members of parliament, from this perspective, how we can support our municipalities, especially those that are struggling with infrastructure, in terms of really, from a policy perspective, how we can assist them to be able to raise the private capital and also get their acts in order to ensure that their profiles are good enough to be able to engage in the market for private funding so that they can blend it with the government one. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not sure if it will be the BFI, whether the BFI is in the infrastructure or is in the National Treasury. But I think one of those we probably need to engage to just make sure that we are really kept up to speed in how really we can really be of assistance in that regard. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Member Masipa. Before I hand over to the other members, I just want to give Mr. Davids the opportunity to share with us the resolutions that he took down during the meeting. Mr. Davids, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Through you, Chairperson, there were a lot of emphasis that was laid that I documented on the EPWP Chairperson that was read by Member Mkontlo and Member Boyson Chairperson, as well as the rollover funds from Member Stoffel and Member Boyson once again Chairperson, and Member Petrus as well Chairperson. So I've captured that Chairperson, and then basically from Member Stoffel's, just a further explanation, just a request for information or a report from the Department of the Premier on the 22 partially achieved and the 9 not achieved Chairperson. Um, yeah, that's in terms of their performance. In terms of the performance indicators, Chair of the SOEs of the Western Cape Chairperson. And Chairperson Member Mkondlo also asked regarding the guidelines on the conditional grants and EPWP from Dr. Paki. So that is also as a request for further information, Chairperson. And then Chairperson is just basically with regarding to the CASP and the CAPEX financial grant allocations, Chairperson. For the province Chairperson from Member Mkondlo. Chairperson, that has been partially addressed by Dr. Pakis, but just perhaps to get more information in that regard, Chairperson, on those two salient matters, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Members, anything that you would like to add or amend to what Mr. David shared with us? Member Bryant.
Thanks. Oh, something's very noisy. Sorry. Oh. Sorry, Chair. Thanks. Chair, I think it's important for us to emphasize how disappointing it is that we haven't received that response and feedback from National Treasury, and I wonder whether it might be prudent for yourself as chairperson on behalf of the committee to write to National Treasury expressing our disappointment and hoping, requesting that we can get that information as soon as possible.
Thank you, Member Bryant. Member Stoppel, you were the next in line.
Thank you, Chairperson. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you.
Chairperson, there was the matter of the crime stats or whatever that was been raised there during the presentation in terms of the Ms. Zinat. So I think, and we have asked to say, I think Member Petrus have said even we need a presentation in terms of the breakdown of that, and I was in support of that because there was this thing that didn't add up in terms of, because we wanted to know whether that stats that has been given there is it in line with our stats essay and subs and whatever, because we want more a detailed presentation in terms of that one. I'm not sure, Chair, whether you have captured me.
Yes, we have. Thank you, Member Stoffel. I see Mr. Davids gave a thumbs up. Member Mkonlo. Member Mkonlo.
Sorry, Chair. I think it's this technology. I had not unmuted myself. Chair, no, I just wanted to. I'm okay with the resolutions as captured by Mr. Davids, and I think also I support writing back to Treasury for the information that we need, because that information is important for our oversight. Thirdly, I think in what Member Masipa is raising, I think, Chair, we may need maybe in our next meeting or just put it upon ourselves as members to suggest what would be the best way as either this committee, if it would reside in this committee, to really find a better way of oversight over the capex expenditure, because I think this is going to be a important discussion, I think, during our term as this parliament, given, I think, the economy, our economy as the country, and also as it would affect the provinces, that infrastructure becomes the priority to bolster economic growth. And there is a lot of work that is happening in that level. So it means we need to then be able to always look, with more focused eyes on the infrastructure budgets, the infrastructure spend, and what we need to do to assist where we can our departments to ensure, that there is improvement and efficiencies of spending, but also other methods, as our Treasury has demonstrated, with starting with alternative financing models and the like. So I'm just putting out there that maybe it's something that we need to perhaps think about, of what would be the best way of oversighting that, even if we have to do that jointly with the infrastructure department, and perhaps even the Department of the Premier, which is actually doing the overall coordination. But I think it's something that we also need to build capacity for the committee as part of ensuring that, the envisaged trillion jobs we want to deliver on the growth for jobs in this very unstable environment with tariffs and the likes. So I think I'm just saying it's something that, like we did with the COVID-19, I think that model that we adopted in the province of bringing together a multi-party type of an oversight on an important matter was helpful, because as members, we're able to have a more bird's eye view, on the holistic nature of an issue that is crucial for our economy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo. Member Stoffel, is that a legacy hand or another resolution?
No, it's not a resolution, Chair. It's just a comment.
Sure.
If I'm allowed.
Yes, please go ahead.
Chair, also in terms of the presentation of the provincial treasurer, I was not really comfortable with the presentation, because the presentation, as much as it was there was not detailed explanation. Chair, there is new members here on the committee. Myself, I'm new. And we are still learning these terms and this explanation and how things filter into each other. So when they present, they should really present with proper explanations. You cannot say there was no proper cooperation with stakeholders. What was the reason for them not to cooperate with you? Those are the things that we want to hear, because at the end of the day, it's our job to assist the department in terms of compliance. So I just want to bring that to the committee, and I hope next time, even the presentation, I'm not sure whether maybe it's me who didn't receive today's presentation from the provincial treasury, but yeah, so I hope, Chair, we'll look into those kind of things and rectify where we can rectify and improve where we can improve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Stoffel. I will definitely have a conversation with the Minister about your concerns. Members, any further resolutions or requests for information? If you do have any further resolutions or requests for information, please feel free to write to Mr. Davids. I just want to confirm, Mr. Davids, is that our business of the day?
Chairperson, yes, that's the business of the day, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Davids. Thank you very much, members. It's been a very long Thursday afternoon in the House and quite a lengthy budget meeting as well. So thank you so much for joining and your participation. I hope you have a great weekend. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Cheers,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, Chair.
Thank you,
Have a great
Fox.
weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.